This
Are you-
conference will now be recorded.
Well, welcome everyone. Today is May 7th, 2019. This is the Clean Weekly Telecon. We've been doing these weekly since 2008, basically, which is pretty impressive. We're at 10 years in. It's kind of hard to fathom how long this has been going on. And yet we always find more to talk about and more new initiatives to bring to the table and to explore with the wider community. So I encourage everyone who's here today, especially our presenters who are both with us, to remember that you're not just engaging the people who are online today, but also a fair number of people do listen to these recordings. So we are recorded. So anyway, you know, it's wonderful to be with you today. Again, Frank Niepold from NOAA. But so before we get into the presentations and discussion that's usually happens, let's do any announcements for the good of the network. Anybody have anything that they would like to announce for everyone?
Yes, actually, Frank. This is Katie Boyd. Patrick and I were just chatting last week, kind of separately, and realized we were both attending the Rising Voices workshop that's happening in Boulder next week, or I guess is it next week, the end of next week. And so we were thinking it'd be great to just have some chat with the Clean Network around our attendance of this meeting, and if there's anything in particular that the Clean Network is interested in sort of us bringing back from this or taking to this meeting or anything. So we were thinking we'd just sort of stay on the call next week on the 14th and have a little conversation around that. So I'll send an email to the group as well, letting everybody know. But if you're interested in joining for that conversation, plan for that next Tuesday after the clean call. And I just put the link to the meeting in the chat in case you're interested in learning more about what I'm even talking about.
So Katie, thank you very much for and Patrick also for raising this to our attention. You know, I remember tracking this a little bit, but as you go into the event, it would be encouraging to see if there's any leaders, program people from this community who would like to engage the clean community as well. I mean, we're always diversifying, expanding, adding more audiences and people. So I would ask you and Patrick to keep an eye open for people who you think should also come back in and engage us also. So
exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were thinking as hopefully something that can come out of this. And so that's why we thought it'd be good to just check in with any others who either may or may not be going to the meeting that might be interested in particular aspects or not, that we should be looking for that for. So yeah.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is Jen. This looks awesome. So please keep us posted. Just echoing everything that Frank says. This looks so good. I wish I had known about it sooner, because I probably tried to come. So, but it looks good. I'm really glad that you guys are going.
Spectacular. So yeah, look forward to hearing more about this. So any other announcements for the network?
This is Jen. I have a couple of things. One is we just had our 5th Youth Climate Summit in New York City this past weekend. That was facilitated by the Kurt Hahn School. It's part of our NOAA Environmental Literacy Grant work, and I brought about 12 other youth climate leaders from the Adirondacks and Catskills down to New York City for this, and it was great to have another NOAA project present, the RISC project, Resilient Schools Consortium, the Department of Education Office of Sustainability was there, the Alliance for Climate Education was there, so there was a lot of representation from the clean community. So that was really great to see that happen. We have another Youth Climate Summit coming up, and this one is in Garrison, New York on May 17th. And if anyone is in the Hudson Valley area and would like to attend, please private message me or reach out or email me, and we'd love to have you. This one is specifically for middle school. So this is our first one that is focused on, that is specifically geared towards and focused on the middle school age. So we are excited to see how this goes. So that is, I think that's it from me for now.
Jen, before you go, I know you and Aaron work with the Drawdown Learn initiative. Do I remember correctly that Drawdown is looking for talks for the 2019 Drawdown Learn event in October, or am I ahead of myself?
I don't think you're ahead of yourself. I have not. That is true. I have not. I was actually going to follow up with Laura Weiland today, who's at Omega, the Omega Institute. So that Drawdown Learn event is October 18th, 19th through 21. I have not seen the call for proposals yet. And as soon as I get that, I can get that out to the Clean Network.
Wonderful. I'll put the link to the event in the chat just so everyone can see it. And if you're not aware of what we're talking about, maybe we can ask Laura when she announces it to join us on a clean call sometime around then, just so more people can dig into the details and really understand what it is. So awesome.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Perfect.
Jen, a question, Jim Callahan.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Frank. This is more just checking in. We'll probably keep working on this for a year or something. I don't know. This is not an ask for someone to specifically do, but it would be that somewhere, somehow, we're working toward a way in which the summits in the country are being listed. I mean, we definitely want to see the whole country and beyond know regularly about the wonderful summits you're putting on, and the ways that we can be supporting each other, California, Washington, the various parts of the country. That's sort of its own. It has its own sort of venue or its own characteristics that I think could help each other. And I don't know, just looking for somebody to take that on. But I just want to keep recognizing we want to make sure that what you're doing gets listed somewhere, right? That people can look up. Okay, there's these summits.
Jim, you're like mind melding with me, because every time I talk about another summit, I'm like, we need a national network or framing or calendar. I don't know. I mean, like a whole bunch of things. So we should talk more about that. I don't want to take too much time away from the presentation today, but I would love to strategize on that exact thing, because I really, they're just popping up all over the place. So I would love to talk more about how to track and monitor what's happening out there.
Okay, good. And so I'll also put it to those that organize, we're part of them, but those who organize it, if they want it, there's some sources that have money, maybe there's some way to kick that into that somebody gets paid to do it. It's not just a volunteer thing. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other presentation announcements, items for the network? We can always come back, at the end. Sometimes we have a little bit of time at the end. Stephanie, is it Macaulay? Is that how you say it?
Yes, it is Macaulay.
Awesome. Nice to meet you, Stephanie, and Juliet Runavarga. Very happy to have you with us today. When I first heard about this term from this multi-solving term from Juliet, I was like, ooh, I really want to know more about this. So I am incredibly excited to understand your way of bringing multi-solving into climate change, public health, and well-being. That framework seems exciting, and I'm eager to learn. So thank you for being with us today, both of you.
Great.
Over to you.
Thanks for that nice welcome. Stephanie, you want to say a word, or should? Yeah, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Stephanie Macaulay, and I'm at Climate Interactive, and I work on the Multisolving project, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And I'm also the operations manager. We're a small team, and I'm located in Greenville, South Carolina. Juliet.
Okay,
maybe.
great. Yeah, and I think I'm seeing some familiar names on the line, which I'm really grateful to see, and I think some names that I don't know too. But it's wonderful as always to connect with the Clean community. And yeah, Frank, we've been at this for a while, so I hope we're going to be at it for a while longer to go. And it's a pleasure to bring. I think we will. I think we're not letting go. We're pushing on new boundaries all the time. So it's a pleasure to speak with everyone today, and we want to keep this informal. So I'm not sure how it works in terms of people chiming in. Maybe Frank can fill us in as to who can do that and how. But
Juliet, you
yeah.
know, there are many ways you can do this. You can call it how you like. We have total flexibility here. Everyone can speak, but if you want to go through your remarks and hold questions until the end, or if you want to be interrupted because it's better for you, you just let it go at the beginning, and then we'll adhere to your.
With this group, I'm totally fine with being interrupted. So if it gets out of hand, we'll rein it in. But I think being interrupted would actually be something I would be grateful for. So I'll just say that. And as Frank's already given you our title, and also I should just mention that most of you know me, but if you don't, I'm at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. I direct the Climate Change Initiative there, which is a group of faculty, about 30 of us, faculty members from across the whole university, ranging from artists to education researchers to engineers, health scientists, physicists, like the whole gamut. Business school, all 6 colleges are represented in our initiative. And I work closely with Climate Interactive, although I haven't had too much of a chance to work with Stephanie yet, so I'm excited to be co-presenting with her. And she's gonna do most of the talking today. What we're talking about is this multi-solving idea, which was developed by Stephanie and others at Climate Interactive, and which I've just used in a classroom setting that I thought might be relevant for this community. So I think many of you have used some of the tools that we've developed with Climate Interactive, and so you may be familiar with the C-ROADS climate model, which is used to frame the world climate simulation. We've also getting ready to launch in a public way this brand new interface of En-ROADS, which is an energy policy simulator. That's going to be really exciting, I think, in terms of we're already using it with policymakers and students, but it'll be something that will be, a lot easier to use than in case you might have used the previous iterations. This one's going to be much more user-friendly and loaded with all kinds of information, and allow your students to create their own pathways to a carbon-neutral society or economy in the future. And then many of you may also be familiar with the learning science research that we've done on learning outcomes from world climate, and how we found that it is something that can motivate science-based action on climate change. So love to help you. If you're not using that tool yet, would love to help you get it up and running in your classroom, or help you get teachers. In fact, we've now got a whole set of tools for teachers or educators who don't know anything about climate change and are able to use the tool regardless. And the climate scoreboard's up there too, which is basically just a way to kind of keep track of what current international pledges, where they would get us, and how far we need to go to achieve our goals. And I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
All right. Yeah, and I'm going to start with kind of the basics on multi-solving, give a little bit of the framework of that, and then show our tools for thinking about it. So a lot of the work here that we've been doing at Climate Interactive especially is the framing is carbon-centric. So it's talking about the units of measure are tons of carbon dioxide, and we're trying to reduce those over time. So as we started thinking about multi-solving, it's actually going to broaden our focus to include, and Juliet, you can go to the next slide for this, just a small change, but so we're now looking at a broader picture, and we're going to look at the other things that will be better in a world that has addressed climate change. And we've defined multi-solving as a way of protecting the climate while improving health, equity, and well-being, and various other areas too, as you'll see in our next few slides. But with our thinking, we've seen studies where, and a lot of this has been health-based. So health is really one of these larger co-benefit areas. So I'll look at a few background studies as we were developing Multisolving here. There was a report in the Lancet Health Journal just looking at transportation and policies to reduce emissions. And they vary greatly in their benefits to other sectors. So looking at more efficient engines and fuel, the reduction in emissions is very similar to a policy that would involve more walking and cycling, but the health outcomes are a lot better in a policy that's going to get more people being active. So those more immediate benefits are a reason to possibly evaluate the policies that are being implemented and look to something that can pull in those co-benefits in a better way. And then on the next slide, you'll see that the costs are also showing up in other areas. So with coal, you see a lot of costs. There are the climate impact costs, but then also Appalachian public health and air pollution and those different health costs are really outweighing the climate impacts, especially in the more immediate results. So those are some of the underlying types of reports we were looking at as we were thinking through Multisolving. And on the next slide, you'll see we've kind of got 4 reasons to back up why we support Multisolving. So ethics and equity come into play a lot, especially where the effects of climate change aren't felt equally in all different types of the population, and the solutions are not always applied equally. So that's core to our Multisolving work, is to try to pay attention to equitable solutions. And another reason to multi-solve that we've come up with is just the financial reason. Bringing together people from different sectors with different concerns and different budgets can help to have more money available for these climate solutions because they're also impacting other areas. And similarly, there's a political reason. Bringing together groups of different people allows for a broader base of support for multi-solving type policies. And there's also a systems reason that optimizing for one goal while just ignoring other goals can lead to poor performance, and pulling people together often brings about better solutions for different groups of people, different sectors. So that's, go ahead.
Yeah, and Stephanie, this was great. If I could just chime in too and saying, like, I think one of the great things about this might sound to a lot of people on the line that, oh, well, they're just talking about co-benefits, which it's actually kind of a different, it's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference between multi-solving and co-benefits. And I think that, and Stephanie, feel free to correct me or edit correct what I'm saying. But I think the way that I see it, at least, is that what you're doing with multi-solving is really sort of acknowledging that while us climate folks may be super focused on the carbon and climate benefits of particular actions and policies, other people may be coming to the table for other reasons. And I think that, fully listening to those other reasons, acknowledging and honoring those other reasons is really important in order to find solutions that are truly multi-solving in terms of, intentionally addressing multiple problems at the same time, and intentionally, they're with intention bringing people into that conversation in a different way. So I do want to just kind of emphasize that difference between just it's a co-benefit. Well, yes, we're talking about co-benefits. That's our perspective from a carbon-centric perspective, but for other people, it's actually the climate piece, maybe the co-benefit, and the political reasons or the equity reasons may actually be the main goal.
Well, and they may also not even be coming to the table yet. So by starting to talk about these types of policies, it'll maybe people will come together and think about common interests a little bit more, was our hope. And some of the process with multi-solving is bringing these groups together just to find what they might have in common or could accomplish and, together. So yeah, definitely all of that. It's a process more so than simply just a way to analyze a policy.
Yeah, and obviously I think it's clear to people, I would assume it's clear to people on the line that Stephanie's talking about not a classroom exercise yet, but actually doing this in the real world. So we'll
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we can go ahead to the next slide. And so this, we've developed a tool that has been helpful in analyzing policies and trying to get at these multi-solving for co-benefits. We call it FLOWER, the Framework for Long-Term Whole System Equity-Based Reflection. And this is something that I think will be a good application for in the classroom, which Juliet can speak about a little bit more toward the end. So we developed FLOWER with, we have climate protection in the center of the FLOWER. That's kind of central to all of these policies that we're looking at. And we've come up with some of the different sectors that can benefit from these types of policies. And we have health, well-being, and safety. So a policy that maybe has co-benefits for improving mental, physical, and spiritual well-being and creating safe conditions to live and work in would be represented by that petal. Jobs and assets talks more to the providing meaningful work at a living wage and building community assets. Food and water looks at policies that are increasing access to healthy food and clean water. Resilience builds people's capacities to survive or thrive in the face of disruption. Energy and mobility discusses secure access to energy, the ability to make things that people need, and the ability to get around. And connection is the petal that we use to refer to having people more connected to their community, more connected to nature, and just kind of, it touches a little bit on that well-being, but it's more just feeling a part of their world. So on the next slide, we can talk a little bit about how to read one of these diagrams. So shading in the petals is basically how we indicate that one of the areas has been fulfilled. And then we've also incorporated some equity through the shading of the outside of the petal or the inside. So a center shading indicates that the petal is actually giving more benefits to those who are already well off. And if we've highlighted the perimeter, it's helping more with groups that have been marginalized. All right, and on the next slide, we'll discuss a little bit more of just the exercises that we would do with groups, really go through these questions and just analyze a policy and try to look for those co-benefits. A lot of the focus we have too is on the more immediate co-benefits, so not really help in reducing disease or something that's a little bit longer term as far as climate goes, but it's more, air pollution and something that's realized more in the immediate future. But just kind of, we go through these series of questions, first of all, looking at whether the policy protects the climate, and then shading each of the different petals, looking to see if the policy may have some benefits there. And we'll go through a couple of those examples in a minute. And another part of the exercise, well, one thing to note is that there are many possible answers for each petal and not really a correct version. So that leaves the exercise pretty open for discussion with groups, and can be a good learning exercise for that reason. And with some audiences, we've simplified and, based on time or based on, the ability level of the audience, we may or may not go into this equity portion where we're talking about who benefits from the policy. and shading the outside or shading the inside of the petal for that. So I'll go through a few examples. And so this one is going to be a compressed work week. So just talking about like policies for telecommuting or working fewer hours a week, or maybe longer days but fewer days. And with this policy, I'll just talk through the different petal shading and jump in if you have any questions. But this is something that you could work through with a community group or with a classroom. So starting at jobs and assets, this type of a policy would increase productivity and possibly redistribute work hours, allowing for maybe more employment. It would, on the health petal, reduce stress and resulting illnesses. For connection, allow more time to spend with children and loved ones, more time at home. And on energy and mobility, to adjust working hours for daylight availability, decreasing stress on the grid, and allowing for fewer travel days to work, a better distribution of those possibly, and alleviating traffic. And then as far as resilience goes, the flexible schedule means fewer work days will be missed for inclement weather possibly. And then we also have that climate protection directly related to the, the fewer hours of travel and the possibly less stress on the grid and less energy usage.
Stephanie, a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the articulation you're providing around each petal, is that it feels like if you were in a community meeting with multi-stakeholders that represent each of these petals, if you will, right, or multiple ones, but different than climate, that articulation, the words you're using about each way that you shade a petal, as it were, is there a secondary tool that you use to kind of documents that in reality, so that everyone sees their self in the climate protection? Do you see what I'm getting at?
I think I do. So basically a resource for the types of impacts on the different petals, more specifically the climate protection section. Is that?
Well, meaning like so, well, sort of like, right? So you when you describe jobs and assets, right? Like you use words about that, and what I'm wondering is like, is there a almost like a matrix, like, or where you fill in secondarily, like, let's really explore this and document what is the jobs or the health aspect of this, and so that you can see details of when a petal is filled in, what is that within the community context that you're working?
We don't have anything specifically like that. We do have a database that we're keeping up with kind of some talking points on multi-solving that touches on the benefits of different ones. We haven't published that yet, but we have some examples, various types of policies where we've just kind of put together multi-solving mini blog posts, going through and analyzing different policies and showing the points for each of these petals that those policies may fill in. So I think that would be the biggest example resource that we have available to kind of get the talking points and to learn a little bit about how to think about these policies. But really I think part of the beauty of the flower exercise too, though, is that there's no right or wrong. And so it could, be dependent on who's participating. And maybe there are experts in some of these specific petals that are going to have a lot more insight into what benefits could really happen, and who's going to, gain those benefits. And so I think it in part just depends on the audience and what they're ready for and what knowledge they come into the exercise with.
Exactly.
Does that answer
Cool.
your question?
Yeah. No, I mean, it absolutely. It's an intriguing model. Keep on going. I'm learning.
Okay, cool. And so 2 more examples. This one is, let's see. Actually, we can do this one first and then go back to electric cars. The Greenway example. I think this one might be better first because they're both transportation. So we'll show this one that involves multi-use greenway in a community. And again, I'll start with just the jobs and assets pedal. So the main benefit here would be to increase property values in a city and just make it more attractive for people to move there and move near the greenway. The health benefit is that the population is going to become more active and that'll improve their health. Connection-wise, it gets people out in nature, and for mobility allows for less dependence on cars. And resilience-wise, this could bring people closer to resources in times of need. They don't have to depend on their car to get somewhere. So most of these pedals with really the question, I think we could probably think about jobs and assets and property values there a little bit, and as far as equity goes. But a lot of these benefits are going to be active and in nature and connecting. So most of the benefits here are going to be felt the same by different populations within the community. But if we go to the next, actually go back to the electric car slide, yeah. So this type of a policy, the benefits here are going to be in, for electric car incentives, lower auto prices and saving money on fuel from switching to electric cars. There will be lower emissions and pollution for everybody in the community, and there will be an energy benefit. But the mobility and the auto cost benefits are only going to help those who are able to drive or able to afford a car. So this type of a policy is not quite as equitable as a greenway or something that brings about more biking and cycling, or biking and walking within a community.
I just want to point out, I think Karen Hallweg has asked a question in the chat box that says scaffolding for the session leader. And I'm not 100% sure I understand that. So Karen, please feel free to chime in. But I think what you're saying is, like, if you were an educator, what materials are available to make this easy for you to adapt it in your classroom? Is that, hoping that's,
Karen,
if that is what Karen's, if that is what Karen's asking, I think Stephanie has mentioned a bunch of resources that are available on Climate Interactive's website in terms of like a library of examples of multi-solving, and many of which have the pedal analysis, at least one pedal or flower analysis kind of associated with them. And then the other is a toolkit that Climate Interactive has on, sort of how you would go through the process of developing these diagrams. And then the last thing that I'm happy to share with people is an example of an assignment that I gave my class to develop poster presentations using this approach. But I think that's something, if that is what you're asking, I mean, that's what's available that I'm aware of right now, and there's probably a lot of room to develop more. Or, I could easily see how this approach could be used to, or could be applied to, say, a project drawdown solution, or other, whatever fill in the blank solutions that your class is exploring, or that you're exploring with your students.
Juliet, I think that's my interpretation of how I would take what Karen's asking, but she can clarify if we didn't infer right. But that's awesome.
Okay, great.
I like your answer.
Thanks.
And to take that a little bit further, so we do have these flower resources on the website. We have some instruction documents, including the slides on how to create and how to read a flower diagram. and also some blank flower diagrams. So you can print those off and have those in the classroom. And then this slide here is just an example. We worked with a community group with people from different sectors, and they kind of put sticky dots on, the areas that they care about or work on, I guess, in their day jobs most. So another variant of the flower activity is to, look at policies or bring in people from different sectors and just kind of indicate where the impacts are or where people's work is taking part to start those conversations. I think one of the main benefits really with flower is just the conversations people have and bringing people together from these different sectors to look at the positive things that they can do with policies.
I think it's interesting to see how many sticky dots there are on connection, which is sort of, I don't know, it's not something that most academics are writing a whole lot about. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a special one for us to add when we were developing flower.
Yeah. All right, so I'll just talk briefly about one example. It's very early days, I feel like, for this, but I taught a course on sustainability last fall and used flower as a framework for organizing student poster presentations and the end of that course. And I think some of the benefits of using this approach in the classroom are that, as Stephanie said, it's very adaptable. It can be used in lots of different ways. It can be applied to many, many different kinds of solutions or policies or decisions or actions. It's got a real world and solutions focus. And of course, by the time a lot of our students are done with our doom and gloom, they're ready for some good news. I think it is really something that would be easy to combine with a service learning kind of a project and with stakeholder engagement in the real world. So if you have a situation where students have an opportunity to go out in the community and talk to community groups or get involved with stakeholder engagement efforts, I think that would be this could be a great tool to use for that work. And then also, as Stephanie said, it's really an effective climate communication tool that can reach beyond the usual suspects. And so a lot of times, a lot of us have people who are students who are not part of the usual suspects group. So it's a nice opportunity to reach them as well, and to give our students who are really passionate about climate change a tool with which they can communicate beyond the choir as well. I think increasingly important for a lot of us is that this is an opportunity to integrate climate justice into solutions conversations. And so just, directly addressing equity, jobs, connection, all of those pieces can link back to climate justice. So just a couple of examples. As I mentioned, I used flower for presentations in a 100-level undergraduate course in sustainability and mostly non-STEM majors. The students created these posters and they did presentations at a public event that was open to the whole campus at the end of the semester. And we're also looking now with help from our NSF, two NSF funded projects to bring flower to low-income first-generation college high school students, and actually also, I should say, to undergraduate students in Upward Bound and SSS, or Student Support Services programs around the country. And those are just federally funded programs that reach low-income first-generation college students. So again, like that social justice piece and connecting to other interests that students have, I think is really important. I think it would be pretty easy. I haven't done this, but I think it would be pretty easy to provide some additional scaffolding, like maybe a glossary or something like, some more explanations and resources for secondary school students, especially like high school and middle school. I can easily see that working. It can be used to frame, it could be used for part of a term paper or an oral presentation or a poster presentation or any other, or even a video. I've not done this yet, but I could easily see how it could be integrated into more advanced courses or in-depth assignments through, as I mentioned, service learning projects where students engage real-world stakeholders. I could imagine using it. In fact, I did use it with students both doing a flower diagram and developing a system map, like a causal loop diagram or a stock flow diagram, for those of you who are familiar with those tools. And that is a way to kind of use multiple approaches to illustrate interactions between climate action and benefits in other sectors. And one thing that I have not done, but I think could be helpful, is to link this very qualitative approach to more quantitative analyses, where you have students, really identify potential co-benefits or multi-solving opportunities, but then really dig into some numbers about what those benefits are, like as Stephanie showed in the first couple of slides, how there can be, maybe the same climate benefit of two policies, but the health benefits are much bigger with one of the policies as opposed to another. And it looks like we've got some questions, so I just want to make sure we address those questions. One is, how do you, quote, do or lead a flower exercise with colleagues or whomever the intended audience is? I'm happy to speak to that, but Stephanie, I don't know, do you want to speak to that since you've used it outside of the classroom, whereas I've just used it in the classroom so far?
Yeah, I can start with that. So we don't really have instructions per se of exactly how to lead an exercise, but what we have done is we've been working with Partnership for Southern Equity in Atlanta, and they have a Just Growth Circle that's looking at growth in Atlanta, equitable growth in Atlanta. And so we've used the flower exercise with them before, and it was mostly dividing a group. It was maybe 20 to 30 into groups of 5 to with this group, it was really looking at the areas that they focus on. So kind of like that sticky dot slide that I have, versus looking at a specific policy. But basically just, I think what we've seen is just to divide up into smaller groups and then have the subject matter, be it a specific policy or where your focus is, and just kind of ask them to go through to take this blank flower and kind of talk through the different petals and what petals they would reach or what would be satisfied based on that policy. And the dialogue usually takes off pretty well from there. The petals kind of guide everybody through, the different sectors. So it's been pretty helpful so far. Juliet, did you want to speak a little bit more toward the classroom version?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in my case, like I introduced the concept in a lecture and discussion in class, and then the students did projects in groups of 3. So they had discussions amongst themselves, and then I went and kind of went around the classroom and talked to them as they were developing their ideas. I also, since they weren't working in a real world situation, it was just one assignment of many in that semester. They weren't engaging with real world stakeholders or anything like that. I just basically gave them a set of resources and opened a Google spreadsheet that we all had access to, in which they could share resources with each other for projects that were happening around the world that they were interested in looking at from a multi-solving perspective. And so they just basically did their own research about a particular project or kind of climate action, and then used the framework to explain it to the rest of their classrooms, their classmates. And I guess one thing that I would mention that I think, maybe one of the weaknesses of it that I think is something that is important to consider in the classroom is that it's not necessarily a weakness in terms of its goal, but just what you might want to keep in mind if you bring this into your classroom is that it's really not quantitative. And the students may need some, in order to keep it grounded in things that are, you may want to keep it grounded in policies and actions that have a quantitatively significant impact on the climate or on other sectors. And so just making sure that you provide students with enough scaffolding and guidance to enable them to achieve the outcome that you're looking for, I think that's important. I'm sorry, I'm getting some echo. I'm not sure why.
So would it be fair to say, just to kind of dig into that a little bit more, that multi-solving as a tool and an approach it hasn't really been used broadly in educational programming, whether it's community programming or informal or formal or youth focused, or you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of modalities in education that relates to climate. So is it kind of in the early stages of that intersectional work, kind of like the world climate was, that it didn't used to be, and then it became a much more educational focused use of C-roads? Is multi-solving kind of at an early stage of that process?
Yeah, I think, and whether you think of world climate as an education focus or not, it probably depends on where you're sitting. But I think we're not, I don't know of other examples where where the flower framework and this multi-solving idea have been used extensively in education. And Stephanie, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my impression.
No, that's correct. And so far, what we've done at Climate Interactive is we have a health and climate intersections report on our website where we've gone through like finding global cases that have focusing on that health benefit along with other benefits using the flower analysis. But most of our work so far has been in developing the terminology and developing the tools, and then looking at policies and doing some analysis there. And it hasn't specifically been an education focus, but we do have some good resources out there with flower, and I think it lends itself really well to those scenarios. And it's something that we may, develop a little bit more as in the future.
So the reason that was a wonderful setup question, because you did a great job in going right where I was hoping you would go. If the people on the phone and people listening beyond now wanted to collaborate with you guys on other educational programming using this framework in collaboration with you, would you be open to that? That's probably another setup question, but let's go for it.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely reach out.
Julian, Stephanie, I have a question for you about that. So this is Jane Heinz Fry. I actually work with two different kinds of audiences. One is adults with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I don't know if you guys have worked with CCL or not. I'd like to know if you have, because one of the things about the policies it puts forward and the bill that's currently been proposed at the federal level is that it's not just good for the climate, it's good for the economy, it is good for jobs, it is good for our health. And it sounds so much like this petal, this flower thing, that I'm just wondering if any brilliant minds have worked together on this in the background. And the other thing is, I work with high school teachers and middle school teachers, and they are interested in having their students do role-playing kinds of exercises about different perspectives people bring to climate change issues. So in that role-playing kind of idea, then it seems perfectly reasonable to introduce the petal analysis, and it probably is better at a qualitative than a quantitative level at that age and stage, I would guess. Do you guys have any experience with that?
I think we've had some contact with CCL with, I believe, the energy model. It may be C-Roads, our climate model, but not with multi-solving at this point. But yeah, we definitely could do that. That would.
Yeah, and also, I mean, as Stephanie's more aware of than I am, I'm sure there's some early effort at pulling some multi-solving benefits into some of the quantitative models, so like jobs or deaths from coal, health problems, or that kind of a thing in En-ROADS, for example. So that's not done yet, but there's some possibility of pulling some of these things into quantitative models as well. I put up, as far as the, I think the multi-solving, Jane, I think the multi-solving framework that you're saying, you're hearing it from CCL too, and I think that's not a huge surprise because it makes a lot of sense, right? And we're hearing about it more generally, like across the board. I mean, Sunrise, obviously, with the whole Green New Deal, and that is all being framed as a multi-solving, in a multi-solving kind of a way. It's just a different term. So I think it's something that, its time is now, right? It
Right.
makes sense in a lot of different ways, and this is just one way of articulating it. I don't think it's like,
Yes.
I do think it's a little bit of great minds think alike, because it's just like the time, this approach makes sense for this time, and different people are coming up with it. But it's just, this is one way that I really like of framing it, because it just makes that intentionality of coming, of seeing not just the climate benefit, but the benefits that other people are going to be more focused on, that are more central to them, as also central. And so I think that that's really important for our group move forward in an effective way, where we're listening and engaging other, engaging people with other top priorities with intentionality. I think there was also a question about, one other note, just Jane, but I wanted to, you mentioned the teachers that you're working with and the role play that they're interested in.
Yes.
I just put up a link to our website, the Climate Change Initiative, with the World Climate in Your Classroom link. And that is, just in case it's of interest to anybody out there, we've developed, what we heard from educators, trio educators, people who are working, they're not experts in climate change at all. They're experts in doing an incredible job supporting their students in transitioning into college and succeeding in college, or university. And so what we heard from them was that they really wanted to use our tools, but they weren't comfortable presenting the climate change science. And so we developed a set of resources around world climate that basically have little videos of us embedded in the slide decks, where we come in and explain some of the stuff that's a little bit tricky, it's a climate change science, or it's like the mechanics of the simulation, or something that they don't necessarily need to understand in order sorry, are you hearing me now? In order to, okay, I'm seeing from Jane saying I'm losing sound, but they don't need to understand all that stuff in order to run a simulation, in order to sort of do what they do well, which is facilitate and hold the space in the room and encourage students to interact with each other and learn from each other. So those resources are there on our website. And then the other thing that I'm seeing here is Jen Kretzer asking if we've used flower with the UN SDGs. I have certainly, in my sustainability class, I certainly taught the students about the UN SDGs. We discussed them, but we didn't make a direct connection with flower. And I hear what you're saying. I don't know, Stephanie, if you guys have used the UN SDGs as a way to guide your thinking about multi-solving at all, but sure, there are definitely some synergies
we haven't
there.
quite yet, no. We haven't reached into that quite yet, but.
Yeah, this is Jen. I was just like, I immediately, when you put the colored flower one up, and I think I thought this the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, SDG, like in some of the framing around, justice and equality and food. And I mean, there's just seems to be a lot of synergy between the two. And so that's why I was like, I'd wondered if you had thought about it, or if anybody else was thinking, it just struck me. It just really struck me right off the bat when I first started learning about this work.
Yeah, thanks. I think that makes a lot of sense.
A question, Juliet and Stephanie. First of all, thank you. Your program, from the experience we've had, should be very successful and is very much on the mark and very much needed. My question would be if taking kind of the framework of the working from this, where you go into the classroom and then you work out. There's also working from the out that then comes to the classroom, or working on the outside. A couple of things from the framework of very large scale public events and education programs. of maybe you can see there's some synergy on this. If we take, for instance, one of the venues that we work within is the science festivals. They draw 50,000 and 15,000 people respectively. Both of the science festivals in the San Francisco Bay Area are organized, are run by healthcare agencies, right? The University of California, San Francisco, and the Buck Institute in Northern California. There's already kind of a connection of climate change and education. So, I mean, it's a thing of if your program wanted to take advantage of that and looked at that, it would be an immediate fit. We could immediately put it into the programming at these large events that go on there. And an example of how it already is like begging for material like what you have is one of the events was 2 miles from the fire in Santa Rosa where people were dying, where people were losing their homes. And the entire region was facing severe, every one of us was facing severe healthcare issues from the fires that are definitely directly attributed to climate change. So there is this connection already begging for those that have somebody who can be there, right? It takes a person who represents the program to show up at these programs, and you can immediately fit in and then be seen, right? It's a great way to introduce your program to it. Another example are the summits. Our local summit is organized by our air district. Our air district does climate change, but it primarily does air quality, health, right? So, I mean, there are these immediate connections for your program to find a place. They're not in the classroom. They're these big places where education happens, and the schools go to these events. Most climate education programs go into the classroom first and ask a K-12 teacher to teach it. We need that to happen, but there's all these opportunities that the vast majority of climate education programs just are not even aware are happening. And just invite you to look at those.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jim, for that. And I feel like we should continue that conversation. I think and I'm sure, Stephanie, I don't know if you think there's an opportunity to send somebody, or also if, I think as an aside on a different project that maybe would make sense to also present at some point to this network, I'm really interested in how we can achieve scale quickly. And I have some thoughts about that. I'd love to, maybe we should connect offline and think about how we can enable more people to have, to be leaders in presenting tools, lots of different tools that we see as being effective and worthwhile to spread. I don't know, Stephanie, do you have any thoughts about capacity to present, or how
I would love to hear more about that and just to explore that possibility. I think it's definitely possible that we could have that capacity. And yeah, the only thing that I really know is we've done out in California, we had someone present at the APHA conference, which I believe is in San Diego last year. And I presented at the one in Atlanta. So I know that healthcare seems to be a great outlet for this also, because they are already thinking about a lot of the co-benefit areas. So so please include me in some of that dialogue about information, and maybe we can explore what's possible.
So
and likewise.
Yeah, we're right up against that hard boundary that we love to live within called time. But I really appreciate you guys. I think you've opened a conversation. And I mean, one of the things that the Clean Network does is, behind the scenes collaborations are stimulated from these kinds of conversations. And, whoever has access to resources and partnerships and collaborations, that's how the genius of this group works. So, it sounds like there's a possibility there. We'll see if that comes to pass. So we should probably leave it there. Is there any last, I forgot, like, oh, I can't go without saying this about this thing that I forgot to say? All right.
I just stuck my email addresses I just put 2 email addresses for me and our climate change initiative in the chat box too, if people want to reach out.
Great.
And
Thank you.
Stephanie, I see in the slide your email is in there as well. So I think
Yep.
we're all have the ability to take this beyond right now. So let's call it there. Thank you so very much for taking the time to spend with us today.
Thanks for
Stephanie?
having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Take care,
you.
everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.